A number of years ago, a Buddhist relics tour came through town. I went to see it. Buddhist relics are if there's some great teacher, great master, maybe you think it's an enlightened being, venerated person. When they're cremated, people will gather bits of ash, maybe bits of bone, and put them in little urns or store them, hand them out in different, so the faithful followers can have them, and they'll be put in little urns, or oftentimes they're put in stupas. A stupa is just a structure. You can see images of very large ones, the size of big buildings if you go to places like Burma, and then people will come there, and it really is a place to inspire the heart and mind, and to I don't know if you'd say worship, but to certainly offer respects and to go pay respects, and this kind of is part of spiritual pilgrimage. So that's what relics are. So the relics tour was coming to town, and I went, and it was put on by one of the Tibetan Buddhist lineages. And it was held at a Shambhala center here in Berkeley. I don't remember the lineage. So when I went into the building, it was lovely. You walked in and there was this beautiful music. I don't remember, it kind of sounded like New Age music or something. It was just put your heart in just this beautiful, receptive place. And you could see down in the middle where you would go in to see the relics, but all around there was sort of some, it's like risers or bleachers where you could sit up and look down and hang out until however long you wanted, until you felt ready to go down, or even afterwards. And what I noticed there was just the feeling of just going there to do that. Everyone felt so connected, and they were in good spirits. And people coming from all different traditions. You could see some people in robes, many kind of robes were there. And a lot of lay people like me, and even people from all sorts of things. I think there was somebody who was like, I forgot, they were on some kind of pyramid thing, and I had the feeling they were in some kind of pyramid energy, maybe, or something. So everybody was there together, and it just had a wonderful, inclusive feeling. Everybody bringing themselves their own way. It just had a wonderful feeling. And then when you were ready to go through, you walked down this one little area, and you had to go through this whole ritual. Someone was just chanted a little prayer or mantra over you, and they sprinkled the kind of, I guess, water, the special water on you, and then you went in. So, okay, I'm walking up, and they had these little glass bowls. Each bowl had so what the relics were, when you saw them, it was like a tiny little black or dark colored fleck of ash, bone, something was just sitting in the bowl. And so I'm going up there, and these are supposed to be like whatever. I don't know who was going to be there. Maybe it's the Buddha, maybe it's whatever. And like, I have to tell you, I don't believe that those are the real relics, the real Buddhism there. I don't know, and I'm aware that I don't know, but I came with that attitude. Now, I didn't come with a bad attitude. I was there in an open-hearted way. But if you ask me, I'd say, well, no, it's not really the Buddha there. So I walk up, and there's the first bowl, Shakyamuni Buddha. That's our Buddha. Well, I just burst into tears. It was amazing. And the thing is, probably I wasn't thinking about whether I believed it, but in any way that mattered, that's the Buddha. And I was like, oh my God, that's the Buddha there. And there's this little bowl. And what it did was it just brought the living feeling of, it just brought him alive in the moment. And I felt just the connection of it. And it was so inspiring. It was like, oh my God. Okay, there's the Buddha. Go to the next bowl. It's Ananda. Oh my God, it's Ananda. Oh, I'm a basket case at this point. Ananda was the Buddha's younger cousin. and had been the Buddha's personal attendant during the last 25 years of the Buddha's life. And the Buddha, Ananda, I think I have a particularly fond place in my own heart, because during the Buddha's life, none of the teachings, none of this was written down. And after the Buddha died, the traditional account is that within a few months after the Buddha died, there was a great council. It's called the First Council. The First Great Council was held. And because Ananda had been around for 25 years for all the Dharma talks, they, all the other senior monastics inquired and talked with Ananda and found out what happened. And so they could come on an agreement with what the teachings were, so they'd all remember them properly. And so a lot of the suttas, if you go back and read the Pali Suttas, many of them begin with the phrase, "Thus have I heard." That's Ananda speaking. So when I would read the suttas and I'd hear that, it just brought, there's Ananda right there, just brought it alive. The same feeling of bringing it alive and close. And so I feel like there's Ananda speaking to me. And so if you ever read the suttas and hear that, you can try that on, that feeling of, you know, keep the aliveness coming through 2,500 years right to you. Okay, there's Ananda. Move on. Two more. Sariputta and Mahamoggallana. Those were the Buddha's two chief disciples. Next one after that is my all-time favorite, Kondonya. There's a bowl. It's Kondonya. Well, Kondonya, what the story of the Buddha is, after he had practiced for these ascetic practices for 5 or 6 years, he almost died. He would practically starve himself. And if you ever see a statue of the Buddha where he looks like his body's like a skeleton with the ribs and everything, that's the ascetic Buddha that is being shown. And then the story is many of you are familiar, he realized that this self-mortification, that asceticism wasn't the way. And as a matter of fact, when he came back and gave his first talk, it was on the middle way between overindulgence and sense pleasures and asceticism. Anyway, he had renounced asceticism, but he had been practicing with these 5 ascetics. Kondonya was one of them. And then when the Buddha went, and all he did was eat like 1 meal a day, but they thought, oh, he's become indulgent, he's fallen off the path. After the Buddha's enlightenment, the story is he came back and he was wondering, well, who can I teach? Who's going to get this? It's too subtle. People aren't going to get it. And so he went through a whole process and he ended up saying, okay, I'm going to go back to the 5 ascetics. They're close. They can get it. And it said that the 5 ascetics, when they saw the Buddha coming, they said, yeah, don't talk to him, ignore him. But they couldn't, he was their buddy. They couldn't constrain themselves. They all came running up, welcomed him in. And then one by one, he's giving Dharma talks to them. They gave the first talk on, I mentioned the other night, a couple of nights ago, on setting in motion or turning the wheel of the Dharma. And through that first Dharma talk, eventually it said all 5 ascetics became arahants. They were the first 5 besides the Buddha. But Kondonya was the first one. And Kondonya, I don't remember, he got stream entry or full arahantship, something. And Buddha saw it, and the Buddha, it shows him with exclamation points going, Kondonya, he's got it, he's got it. Buddha's all excited. Well, that's Kondonya. There he is in the bowl. And then you went through a few more as it came in more recent times. It went through some of the figures who were important in Indian Tantric Buddhism, who were important in Tibetan Buddhism. You'll hear names like Nagarjuna, Milarepa, Atisha Talopa. You may have heard of some of those names. Some of those people, scholars don't really even know if they existed. Nagarjuna might have been there too, and people aren't, he is probably for the Tibetan Buddhists, maybe second only to the Buddha. Some scholars don't know if he existed, or maybe there were several figures who sort of came together historically to be preserved in this idea of Nagarjuna. But so these important names are all in the bowls there. So the main thing about this is this idea of how it didn't matter my view or my opinion. We talked about views and opinions last night. In the way that mattered, it was alive. It was a living thing in my heart and in my mind. And so I want to spend a little time on that, exploring this, because think about it. If back at the time of the Buddha, there are many stories where people would hear a talk, be around the Buddha, and then they would have this awakening, this enlightenment experience. What was going on? Well, first of all, think about it. When the Buddha taught, it was as real as this moment is real right now. That's what it was. It was actual people in the reality of the moment together. And the Buddha must have had an amazing, profound presence, first of all. And I mentioned a few nights ago that I've met maybe 3 people that I can think of that I felt, just being in their presence, I felt the palpable presence. And so the Buddha probably had a very profound presence. It's said, according to the tradition, that he had psychic powers. I don't know, but that he could know the minds of people so they could get exactly what was needed. But the other thing is, I think that if each of us thought the actual Buddha was here right now, given the Dharma talk, the quality of our listening and receptivity would probably be on a whole different level. Right? I want to come back to that idea, because is it possible to bring that same level of receptivity and listening to what life is teaching us? That's the Buddha alive now teaching us, right? Now, why does it have to be different than that? And so I want to explore just this idea of keeping in mind the aliveness of the masters. What's the message of the great masters for us, for all of them? I mean, the details are different, but what is that kind of the essence that even today, great, if there are such things, but certainly I'm thinking back the great figures historically, what's the message of that? Each of the spiritual traditions, besides Buddhism, there's many great spiritual traditions. And then even within Buddhism, it's a vast, vast world with many, many flavors and styles and traditions. So there's a lot of different, even within Buddhism, many different beliefs. All the traditions don't even share the same goals or ideas of what enlightenment is or what the goal is. It's actually quite diverse. And then the practices so there's a lot of differences, and it's not that we have to let go of those differences that we relate to or hold certain views about that. That's fine. But underneath all the range of approaches, I propose that what we're being asked for is actually something more, I don't know if simple is the word, but more fundamental. And it's what we've been talking here. I've been framing it using this phrase a number of times, liberation through non-clinging. But even if we back from that, we've been working on cultivating certain qualities in our hearts and minds. And what are those qualities have been? We haven't talked so much here on this retreat about what we call sila, which is sometimes called morality or ethics, and haven't really spent time, but that's a part of it. I probably should have emphasized more. If you're around the Dharma scene of any length of time, it gets talked about a lot. Developing our good hearts, right? We talk about strengthening in in living in a way that's less reactive and more wisely responsive. Flowing in the stream of non-clinging is a phrase. Living in a way where our hearts don't close off so much. These kind of foundational qualities that we are all, I hope, want to cultivate in ourselves. And so then in service of that, we've had these teachings transmitted down to us for, say, we don't know the exact date of the Buddha. It's changed since I was maybe 20 years ago or 30 when I was more engaged in all this stuff. They used to give certain dates of the Buddha, and they would say it's roughly 2,500 years ago. I haven't kept up with the scholarship. They may have moved the dates a little more recent by a century or two of the Buddha. We don't really know. But let's just say a nice round number, 2,500 years. These teachings have been transmitted and handed down in an unbroken chain from generation to generation. Think about that. Think about this. We're the living link in the chain now. It's not anybody else. It's you. It's us. We're the students of the previous generation. We are the elders of the next generation. It's on us, not me, not somebody else, you, each of us, to come to an awakening, to learn to live. You don't have to be perfect about it. Look, I don't know anybody's perfect, but moving towards having the intention, the aspiration to move ourselves in a way, and the way you've heard me say this many times, can we learn to live in a way that creates less and less suffering for ourselves and for others, and that creates more, people say happiness. I personally like the word well-being, but happiness, well-being for ourselves and others. And not only can we learn to do it, but can we discover the skillful means or the way to do it so that we can help pass that on. We can pass it on by our presence and our being. People can feel it. You know, they know if they see someone coming, that person, they don't deem them to be that safe, right? You're going to cross the street when you come or whatever. People can feel it when they know you are safe. And there's an acceptance, a love, or whatever. When we bring these Dharma qualities, people can feel it and they respond to it. And it means a lot just by your presence. And our teaching, our wisdom, whatever. We don't have to officially be teachers or whatever. But this is how we bring the living Dharma for ourselves and for others. We can sometimes think of, I think it's very common, we think of enlightenment, this is a funny term, as being, because this has a lot of connotations. And people, by the way, do use the term with many different meanings. Sometimes quite casually, people say, oh yeah, someone's come to town, they're an enlightened master. Okay, may it be so. I tend to hold that with, could be, don't know, it's okay, don't have to make a thing about it. My point is people hold that with a lot of different views. But however we hold this word enlightenment, often people think of it as something, well, that sounds big. Something far away, maybe for people, I don't know what, who live in the cave or something like that for 30 years. There aren't many people who lived in caves for 30 years, although it has happened, but not too much. Right? And it can make it feel far away from us. But rather than thinking of it like that, I don't tend to think about that. I don't know if what I'm about to say is some people might say this is not a right view, but I never think about enlightenment. That doesn't enter my mind. I talk about this, I use this thing to often say, I haven't reached the end of the path, but I don't even think about that. Personally, I couldn't care less. I'll tell you what I do care about. Now, you have to see for yourself. I don't have an opinion of however anyone else holds it. I care a lot about what's real and true in the present moment. That's all you have anyway, right? There, I'm not holding back. I want to be present and awake, deeply perceptive. I want to be undistracted. I want to live in a way where my heart never closes off to any living beings. And when it does close off, I want to know it and see it. And I want to show up and really bring the best of what I have to be able to hold it as that living teacher. There's a teaching of the master right there, and to take it on. I don't want to, in the present moment, say, well, it's okay if I'm reactive here. It's good enough because I'm doing pretty good. Actually, maybe that is a kind way to hold myself. But what I'm up for without an overstriving is tending to what's actually real and true in the moment. And for me, that means, am I resting in the stream of non-clinging? Is there a lot of identification? Have I contracted around a fixed sense of self? All of these things we talk about. Or is there the real kind of resting in the emptiness, the changing, unfolding, and not having to create this process of becoming into having to be anything? This is what we all talk about in the Dharma. So I'm all in the any present moment. And by doing that, that's everything that people talk about in the quest for enlightenment. For whatever reason in my mind, that far off remote goal of enlightenment is just not there. And actually it allows me to be on a path that I take seriously. And I do have in mind that it's aiming somewhere. But the way I'm doing it is with the feeling, the sense of not having to get anywhere, but just how is the quality I'm bringing to being here. So that's where I think the real awakening and the real fruit comes alive for us right here and now. So that's kind of the idea I'm getting at. And so one way to think about it is, we talk about life being our teacher. You know, you could hold the sense of the Buddha or these great masters being alive, just in the same sense that I said, well, I don't really think that was real. I actually don't really think I don't know. I do not know. I know that it's just a belief and a view that wasn't the real relic. I still believe it, but I'm not going to get in a fight with you about if you do believe it, right? It's like if someone landed on the moon or not. I think we did. If you think they didn't, that's all right. I care about your good heart. So I don't think that's the Buddha there or Condonia. I don't believe they've got it. But you know what? In the way that has any meaning at all, it is. And it brought the aliveness. It did it for me. That's the only thing that's of value. Not is it really the bone from here or there. Right? In that way, the Buddha and the great masters are alive now. So what it makes alive now is, what is it like if the Buddha is here teaching you now? That's what we mean when we say, what would it be like if every moment is your teacher? And I offered the other day, someone had given me the experiment that I found was very valuable. Taking it on as if everybody, not just that everyone was my teacher, you can take it a step further. Just as a thought experiment, what if everyone's enlightened but you? Everything they're doing is for your benefit. What about that? By the way, that doesn't mean you just become a passive blob and take it. You know, there's an old teaching story from one of the Hindu traditions. It's meant to be a little humorous, but I kind of like it. It's where somebody's a faithful spiritual pilgrim is walking up the mountain road, and someone comes running down the road yelling, mad elephant, get out of the road, mad elephant. And the pilgrim stops in the middle of the road and says, you know, I believe in God, I'm sincere, God will protect me. And the elephant runs down, tramples the person, kills them. And then they wake up, they're in heaven, and they say to God, what happened? I believed in you, I thought you were going to protect me. And God says, I did, I came running down the road yelling, mad elephant, get out of the road. And it's kind of a funny story, but I think that's the idea. If we take life as our teacher, we still have to have a wise response to life, but it's how we shift our attitude to be able to be receptive in the appropriate way and the appropriate time to what the teaching is, okay? And then let that inform what we're doing. Another thing that, so I'm just start to bring a little suggestions here on how we can actualize not fighting life, not getting stuck in our opinions and our views, but just staying really open with a wisdom and a discernment and a receptive kind attitude that will then allow us to show up more present and take in the teachings. So another suggestion I'd offer is, there's a term in Pali called manas, and it's translated, I just had a great Pali scholar here. It's not ego. Just type me in the chat here, somebody. I just had a brain derp. Wow, I'm getting older. Well, conceit. Thank you, Dawn. I knew that. I appreciate that, Dawn. Gosh, isn't it a funny thing when you're here and you this? I've taught this like 300 times. Senior moment, yes. Thanks for the chats, everyone. But there it was, out of my mind. This is what happens, right? So manas, translated as conceit, it's the comparing mind. So, and it's said, if you think you're better than someone, that's considered conceit. If you consider yourself less than someone or equal, that's also manas, the same conceit. I think isn't that interesting? Like, why is that conceit? But what it's pointing to is the whole self-referential. It's trying to take us out of that paradigm of referencing to the self. How am I doing? Is comparison to others. And it's that whole place is just looking to see, am I okay? How am I doing? By the way, that's an experiment that's worth doing sometime if you haven't. Notice what percentage of your own time, your mind is in some version of, am I okay? Am I going to be okay? I'm not okay. Strategizing how I'm going to be okay. For a lot of people, it's a lot of the time. This thing of manas is giving us to step out of the conceit around fixated on yourself and a little letting go around the self, I think is maybe a nice way to think about it. Well, so the Buddha is suggesting we don't fall into this judging of ourselves. But if many of us, I put myself in here, I don't always listen to the Buddha's advice. So if you are going to judge yourself, I would like to offer that, first of all, we're all experts on the lived experience of our life, but we're the least qualified in the judgments we bring, the stories we tell, what we make of it, because we're not objective. We don't see it objectively. What we make it to be. And so if you're going to judge yourself, we often fall into judging by how well or poorly, good or bad, we think we're doing it, how we're showing up in whatever it is, like our meditation practice or something. I'm going to suggest that a more accurate assessment, and one that creates less suffering and will actually do us more good, is not how good or bad you think you're doing whatever it is, but by your intention. How good or bad we're doing it, those are the conditioned patterns of our minds. Well, that's what we're all working on. But what's more fundamentally true, even when you lose, you fall into ill will and you get into conflict. Yes, the clouds have come in and, the sun's not shining, you can't see it, but it just got covered over. But you've lost connection in the moment, but your sincere essence there of what's true about your intention, your aspirations, your being, it hasn't gone away. You just lost connection with it. So if you fall into that judging or critical mind, try connecting back with intention. We've been saying this a lot on this retreat, so but it's important to come back to. It's so funny how we can judge ourselves in so many ways. I cannot tell you how many people judge their whole Dharma practice by how their formal meditation is going. It reminds me of a time I used to do a lot of prison work. I was a Buddhist chaplain at 2 of the California state prisons. I started Dharma programs, meditation groups in 2 prisons. They're still going. I'm not in now. I trained some other people, but after 25 years, they're still going. 2 of the prisons down near Soledad, the level 2 prison, men's correctional training facility, and the level 4 prison, Salinas Valley prison. And I remember going down there, and there were sometimes, if they, especially in the level 4 prison, if there had been a violent incident, stabbing or something, and the whole prison would go on lockdown. And until for a few days, a week, sometimes it could be a couple of months. And basically you're in your cell that whole time. They would bring your food to your cell, and you would come out twice a week, just one at a time, to go get a shower. And that's it. And I remember once there was a long lockdown like that. We couldn't run our group. I was still able to come in, and as the chaplain, and I would come in once a week, and I could go around to the guys in our group, check on them, and they appreciated that. So finally, after whatever, maybe a couple of months, we could run the group again, and everybody's back. So I'm going around, I'm asking, how are you guys doing? How was it? And of course, there's, as you can imagine, quite a range. Some people, it was very difficult. Some managed, pretty well. And then I said, well, how's your meditation practice going? And this one guy said to me, I don't know. I just couldn't find the time to meditate. And I loved that. It was so liberating. It was like, and so I offer this to you. You're not doing anything wrong. This is how it is to be a human being. So notice how it is for you here. Maybe, I don't know, everybody's situation is different, but I know for some of you, you're in your own space. You've tried to set aside distractions. Some of you probably done a pretty good job, but many of us see the pulls can still be there. And that's part of being a human being, and not to fall into judging ourselves. And so one of the things people often say to me is, they'll say, yeah, but you don't understand. I could do better. No, you can't. So let me back up for a second. How should I say it? It's like this. It's sort of, I've got good news and bad news. I'll give you the bad news first. You're doing the best. It looks like this. Best you can. That kind of looks like this. The good news. You're doing the best you can. It looks like this. Feel the difference? You can step out of the self-judgment. If you could do it better, you could. If you could not be pulled into things that you don't want to be pulled in better than they pull you off, you would. So when you sit down to meditate, and next thing you know, after 3 minutes, your body is up walking, and all it's going to do is check your CNN on for the 20th time for the day. We have to respect those energies and powers, those not just kind of dismiss them and say, oh, I can. Those are strong pulls. I remember back when I used to work in my engineering days in Silicon Valley, and it would be Sunday night. I have to get up early in the Monday morning to go to work, and I'd be tired, and I didn't want to read, and I was too tired to do something else or meditate. And so I didn't watch a lot of TV, but sometimes, and still today, occasionally, watch a little TV here and there just to kind of turn off my brain. And I start flipping around the channels, and I'd come across an old Western movie. And I grew up watching World War II movies and Westerns with my dad. So I got powerful pull towards World War II movies. Any kind of World War II movies could do, but especially my dad fought in Europe. So in the European theater, I'm kind of, if you want to know anything about him, talk to me. I fancy myself someone as a World War II aficionado. A Western. There it is. It's late at night. I turn it on. It's some old cowboy movie. I've seen it 4 times, and it's not a good one. And I'm pulled in. So I'm sitting there saying to myself, Richard, if you don't get up, and you're going to be too sleepy in the morning to meditate, You know what's going to happen. Still sitting, still sitting. And then I try all these different techniques. I say, all right, nothing's actually happening. There's no shootout going on. The cowboys aren't, there's a director and he's yelling action and he's yelling cut. It's not real. And then 2 hours later, it's 2:30 a.m. The movie's over. Now I can go to bed. In the morning, I'm too tired to meditate. And so it goes. That's an example of a real force and power. And the way I was able to work with it was not to fight against it, but actually stop and go, wait a minute. I have to honor and respect these forces in me. And it's not judging myself. This is what we have. And that's my point, is we can start to judge ourselves here rather than realizing, this is a pattern in me. It's a real force. And we start to shift our relationship with it. So it's a way we can hold ourselves in a more kind way. And so it goes back, that's what I mean. And I'm trying to be a little humorous, but realize that we are doing the best we can. We work with these forces, but slowly over time, as we direct our efforts and energies, things shift, but they may not shift overnight. And one of the images that I often use is of an oil tanker, transatlantic, transocean oil tanker. And those ships are, I don't know, maybe, what are they, like a few hundred feet, few hundred yards long? They're huge, loaded up with all that oil. They're heavy. And if they're heading in a certain direction, they have a certain momentum. And if you're going north and then you want to turn east, that doesn't happen right away. Because all of that momentum, there's a lot of power going in a certain direction. And so you have to plan way ahead. And then you slowly start turning the rudder, and it slowly starts kind of lumbering around, and it takes a lot, and eventually it gets around, and now the momentum's moving in a certain way, new direction. And it's like that with these habitual patterns, conditioned patterns that we've had for a lifetime. And if you believe the traditional Buddhist teachings, lifetimes, they run deep. And if we've spent our whole life chasing after our happiness chasing after our likes and dislikes, or whatever it is, we're not going to just change that right away. But we start to redirect our attention, but the momentum still pulls us in a certain way. We just have to recognize that that's how it is. But over time, it starts to shift. And eventually, without having to do anything, the natural, even unconsciously, direction is in a different way. And so it's kind of like that. So it was the same way for the great masters. When you read some of the stories, and especially some of those later Indian tantric Buddhists, the stories are, they had rough lives. It was tough, painful struggles, it said, they went through. And they were like us. They were human beings. So they all had their struggles. And they were real human beings. We've kind of deified the Buddha in a way, but he wasn't a god. As a matter of fact, he's recorded as saying that about himself. He was a person like you and me. And I find that when I hold it like that, it's not being disrespectful of the Buddha in any way. I find it inspiring that, he had his story too, and his suffering and his struggles, and that, it's more relatable is what I'm saying. Until your name is on one of those bowls, you're going to have your struggles too. Right. And you're not doing anything wrong, because in our tradition, by definition, until we're Buddhas or arhats ourselves, fully enlightened ourselves, there's greed, hatred, and delusion is still, or the seeds, potential seeds of it, still in our minds. So it's not, there's anything wrong with us. When we fall down 1,000 times, we can, it's just part of enlightenment training, being a human being. and sometimes people ask me the question, well, can I do it? Can I come to an awakening? And my answer is always, it's not a theoretical question. It's looking back into the moment and seeing what's actually happening, and then how you can use the moment, and asking and looking to see yourself, what will serve me to more open, not can I, but is there something, just ask and inquire and let the answer come. And it's funny because people think they can't do it. And this is an important point also. Look, there are real limitations that we all have in our lives, right? I mean, it doesn't matter how much I practice. I'm not going to be a basketball player in the NBA, right? That's a real physical limitation. So there, of course, we have all areas in our lives where we have real limitations. And you know what? It'd be kind of cool to be a basketball player in the NBA and all that. But from a Dharma perspective, that will give you some satisfaction temporarily, but it's not ultimately going to solve our problem, right? Things don't last. These are basic Dharma teachings. In all the areas that are going to be more fundamentally a refuge for us, that are going to do us some real good in the long term, the qualities of Dharma in our hearts and minds, there aren't any limitations at all. It's a wonderful thing when you reflect on it. The only areas of life where there are limitations are the areas that are already inherently limited in their ability to provide happiness. And in the area that can really profoundly, fundamentally, deeply shift our whole being, there aren't any limitations. And it goes back to what I was saying. Yes, there are conditioned patterns, but they can be shifted. The ones in you that are holding on the deepest and the longest, and every one of us have them. I've spoken with a couple of you today, a few of you today, talking about some of these deeply conditioned patterns. We've all got ours, right? We're all working on them. And we can take some joy and some happiness into knowing that we're willing to show up and do this. I think it's heroic work just to sit down and be present with yourself when all that's up is your self-esteem and despair. That's amazing work. I mean, we can, and sometimes we have to back away too, and we can't always do it. So I think that's good news when I reflect on it in this way. So a couple more things as we come to the end here. It is true that in whatever way we direct ourselves, that's what's going to grow and strengthen in us. And in the ways we don't feed, they lose their power and weaken. And that's just known. I mean, there's been a lot of psychological and brain research about it. So we know these neural pathways, these conditioned patterns can be strengthened in new ways, and the old ways can start to lose their efficacy. We have to bring the parami of patience, and that's not always so easy when you're wondering when this pattern that's been holding on for 10 years, 20 years. I don't remember, I may have mentioned on this retreat, but I mentioned to someone recently that I fell into some despair sometime in this last month because I had this idea, I think I did say it here, but I'll repeat it, of this idea of perfecting love. And that after all this time, and I'm not doing so bad, I think I'm fine, but my mind can fall into ill will. And as I've shared about how I like to use it and work with it when it comes up, because it's showing me where my learning edge is. And that's the way I think hopefully we can all hold it. But I really fell into despair, which was actually a deluded kind of view, because it was fixing a clinging or or latching on to some identity of this is me and why I can't do it. I'm never going to do it. I've been doing this all these years. and my mind can still have places where it's not in perfect love. And then it took some doing about coming to the realization that maybe the perfection of love wasn't that these states can never rise in my mind. Oh, that would be fine and good, but that I hold them with wisdom and kindness and some love and allowing, and that's the love, including the difficult places in myself. I don't want to call them the broken places, but maybe you feel that way sometimes, that can be included too. And so it shifted, and I was able to soften and let go around it. And it felt like I can never do it. But then I did remember, and this is what I want to end with, a little bit more about this idea that really what's I know to be true is that for each of us here, I'm going to say this, it's going to sound like a generic platitude of feel good, but bear with me, please. You cannot help but move in the direction of greater freedom and liberation, greater enlightenment, if you will. It's not, I'm going to use a double negative. It's not possible that you won't go to greater enlightenment. It cannot be. So I want to give you an image. In the old Pali texts, there's a lot of water imagery. A lot of it is beautiful imagery. We didn't get into the jhanas on this retreat. It just was a time issue. But when you look at the jhanas, for example, there's some stock phrases, the same standard phrase that there's the definition of jhana, and about half the time those appear in the texts. They're accompanied by what are called the jhana similes, and they're beautiful water images. There's many other images we talk about, going against the stream, and there's kind of this image of the stream, but that's kind of the flow of kind of human delusion, if you will, and that's kind of going against the stream. But there's another image that I love, which is the image of entering the stream. So I want to hang out here a little bit with this idea of entering the stream. What is it if you go down to any river, stream, and you look, the water's moving. And I was growing up in Memphis, Tennessee. It's the Bluff City on the bluff overlooking the river. It's a big, powerful river. And if you paddle out in the middle of it, you're going downstream, cannot be stopped. No way. And if you stay in there, it empties out into the ocean at New Orleans, in the Delta down there. It's the power of that river moves to the ocean. In the same way, the stream of the Dharma, it's what I was talking about earlier, in whatever directions we apply ourselves, it cannot help but strengthen and grow. And so this idea of entering the stream is that we become immersed in Dharma, and the stream of Dharma carries us. And so there's all these different ways to think of it, of the stream. Some of us may be testing it out. Maybe you're putting a little toe in the water. What's this Dharma? Let me try it on. Maybe it's like, okay, maybe I'll go in up to my ankles, whatever, but we're all in this. Some of us are up to our waist, some of us just out in the middle. That's careful, because now we can another way to fall into judging about where you are in entering the stream. Our minds will find a way to judge ourselves. It just doesn't stop. But you get the idea. So this idea is we're all in the process, our own process of entering the stream. And it's the same way. Anybody who's been a Dharma practitioner for any length of time knows experientially, as a fundamental truth, that the power in the stream of Dharma is strong. It's like the Mississippi River, for real. And when it becomes alive in you, and fortunately, you don't have to wait till you reach whatever this end of the path is for the awakening of the stream of, I call it the stream of non-clinging, the stream of wakefulness, the stream of Dharma, to be alive and to carry us more and more. And then it's taking you down. Even then, there will be times that you're thinking, wow, I'm in the stream of Dharma. Yeah, yeah. And then all of a sudden, what happened? I got in an argument. I'm heading the wrong way. I've lost connection with the stream. It's like though, but so I've been in an airplane flying above the Mississippi River. And it turns out California is not the only part of the country that has, some of you know this, that's prone to earthquakes. And around Memphis, they don't have them often, maybe like once every 100 years or something, but there's faults there, earthquake faults, and they could have them. So over thousands, I don't know, millions, thousands of years, there have been quakes that have actually changed the direction of the river. And so there are spots now where the river's heading south and it actually bends around. It goes around a bend. It's going the wrong way. It's going north. What's going on here? The ocean's south. When you see the big picture, it bends back around in its time. It knows when to bend around and it heads back south. So we have to hold ourselves with the big picture. Because when we find ourselves, we want to go south and we find that we're going north, we don't see the big picture and we don't realize, well, okay, the condition pattern came, but in the big stream is still carrying us. We don't want to lose sight of that. That's when the kindness, the patience, the self-empathy can come in to know, yeah, I got turned around north a little bit, but the Dharma will pull you back around if you stay receptive and staying connected. And so it's like this. I don't know much about aeronautics, but what I've been told is when they're flying these big commercial jets, whatever the heading that you're on, that they say, I think this is right, you're never perfectly on course every second. You might be blown off a little here and there, and it's always correcting. So the way I like to think about it is, you don't have to be perfectly on track, right? If I want to go north, and I'm pulled off direction, I just don't want to be going backwards. And I'm not talking about the stream carrying you meandering around. I don't want to be consciously, going against my own intentions when I'm aware and know what's happening. But as long as we stay aligned and stay awake and attuned, because if you get off course, it's a self-correcting process. You'll be able to feel, this doesn't feel right. That didn't feel really good the way I spoke to that person. Okay, it's correcting. We're getting the feedback. Oh yeah, it gets us back on course. And then we can do whatever we need to do. So in that way, I hope it will gladden your own heart and not mind to know that the stream of Dharma, it really does only head one way. That's to greater freedom, greater liberation. And you are part of that stream. And so remembering, if you ever fall into difficulty or despair, that it's not possible that you can't head where that stream is heading, towards your own greater liberation and freedom, happiness and peace. So thank you for your kind listening. Let us sit silently just for a few breaths, and then I'll ring a bell for us to end.